Welcome to Words of Wisdom from Kick-Ass Women.
Stories and advice about moving forward, punching through that glass ceiling, pushing harder, and blazing trails from women we really admire.
Welcome back to another episode of Words of Wisdom from Kick-Ass Women. This is a show where we spotlight women who have walked through fire, almost literally, but always come out lit from within.
Yeah, and we don't do surface level here, just so you are aware. We talk about the pivots and the breakdowns, the reinventions, and the brave decisions that sometimes can change everything.
And so our guest today, she's going to kind of walk us through 3 phases of her fire, right? She is going to talk about things that happened to her in her 30s, her 40s, and her 50s, though I got to be honest, when I look at her, I can't imagine she's in her 50s.
Right.
How about that? And so really what's exciting about this is that she's going to talk about how these kind of consecutive things that happen to her just represent like lost, found, and flow.
Yeah. Depression that didn't make sense. I think many of us can relate to that. An unconventional path to motherhood, and burnout that nearly suffocated her. But we are so glad she is sitting beside us today.
Sounds like a lot, but spoiler alert, I think it all ends up okay. Because now, in 2026, there's clarity.
There is. Yes, yes.
So welcome, Monica Sharma. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
That's correct.
Just so everybody knows, this one is for every woman who's ever thought, my life looks successful, so why don't I feel it? Which I can totally relate to. So Monica, thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be here with you both.
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting topic. There's so much to dive into. So maybe we should just get started. Maybe we'll do it chronologically, kind of starting back in your 30s, right?
Sure.
So, like Mary just said, on paper, you looked completely successful, right? Mm-hmm. But that wasn't necessarily how you were feeling, right? So that had to be tough.
Well, for those of you who can't see me, I am of South Asian descent, and I grew up with parents who immigrated from India. And so there was a lot of cultural expectations for kids, for women, to grow up. You know, there was a lot of expectation to pursue a medical career at that time when I was younger, and then to get married, especially as a woman, but for both, sons and daughters. So I ended up going to graduate school for psychology rather than going into medical school, and it just felt, right for me, more true to who I am. Went into my 30s, though, and I was always trying to do the right thing. So I have a younger brother who is definitely, marches to the beat of his own drummer. He's a musician. He's creative. He ended up doing all the things not necessarily according to a prescribed path, and we found in our 30s, like, he's getting married. He's doing all these things, and I had not achieved those things to myself. And I believe that I started to question my own worth. I started to feel like, I did start to have some feelings of depression. It kicked me into this, like, what's wrong with me? And I started to feel like nothing that I had in my life belonged to me.
You really took the pressure seriously, didn't you?
Yeah,
Wow.
I was living according to, how do I be a good girl? How do I be, smart in school and get the good grades? I did a lot of volunteer work. I was very social. I was very polite.
Yeah, of course. We all are victims of our own politeness.
Very much so. And so I wasn't, daring anything at that time, but yet, like, life somehow wasn't falling into place the way that it was expected for me to live. So I did go into some depression at that time, but I didn't understand it because I didn't appear like there was anything around me to warrant being depressed. There was a lot of shame around it, a lot of hiding. I was teaching graduate school classes at that time. I was, running a counseling center at a college center in the Chicagoland area. There was a lot that I was doing, teaching classes. I said that. And then also private practice.
So, and I mean, this is your field of study. So were you able to self-diagnose the depression, or did it take longer? Sometimes it's hard to figure out you're depressed, right?
Yes, I did not diagnose it for myself. I did go to therapy. I did see a psychiatrist. I got psychological evaluation done. And that pointed to depression. I kept thinking like, gosh, why can't I focus? Why can't I get things done? And with depression, there is also similar like inability to follow through, inability to focus and concentrate, to stay on task. And so what I was thinking, I must have ADHD, which I do, but I kept wanting to like, because there was something that wasn't as like shameful or embarrassing and weak about having ADHD versus depression. But I did get diagnosed with depression.
Thank goodness some of that is now more out in the open, and the shame and the stigma doesn't really come into play. Or am I just, being a Pollyanna?
Yeah, there is a lot more awareness and understanding around it. At that time, there was still a lot of stigma around it. It was in the early 2000s that I had gone through this. And just, again, feeling weak, inadequate, something wrong with me.
Yeah, that's pretty profound. For our listeners, personally, I'll be self-disclosed. I have clinical depression. I have to do things to help myself through that on a regular basis. And those feelings of loss, or like you don't own it, or even the feelings of, waking up in the morning and going, I've got to open my laptop. And I don't even have the energy to open my laptop, right? What did you do as a consequence of that diagnosis? And how do you think you managed it? I'd be interested to hear that.
So I ended up getting prescribed Lexapro. So I was put on some antidepressant medication, which I have to admit, it helped me about 3 weeks in. Suddenly it's like, it's a beautiful day outside.
That's me and my best friend Prozac. That's all I'm saying.
It was the spring. And so like suddenly it's a warm day. The sun is out. So I really felt the benefits. And I had no doubt that it was a result of the medication. I, however, still felt like I kind of kicked this in some ways. Like I didn't see myself as somebody who was going to be on medication long term. I still didn't have that part of accepting it for myself. Over the summer, though, because this was in the spring when I first started medication, over the summer I started to feel drawn toward more holistic health practices.
Okay.
And looking at what can I do, more lifestyle oriented, to help lift me up.
And isn't that
nice.
when you kind of changed your whole life and did something rather radical?
Was this with the Institute of Integrative Nutrition? Is that what we're talking about now?
It is.
Oh, say more.
Yeah, tell us everything.
So really like the big wake-up call for me was that I had stumbled upon this course, and it was in New York City. It took place over 10 weekends, over 8 months. I just felt somehow like compelled, like this is where I need to be. Everybody in my life is like, don't rush into anything. Don't be impulsive. Like you're in debt right now. Wait, see if you can find something closer to home, and everyone, and they made sense. There was absolutely nothing wrong with what they were saying.
Right.
What fun is that?
Well, but it's the logic, right? It really works on you and can keep you from going for what you feel you're being called to, right?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is I believed them, but there was something inside of me that just kept tugging and kept going to the website and looking and wondering. Finally, on the day of the deadline, Saturday morning, I remember, and I just called them, and because we were still doing more phone calls at that time, and called them with my credit card in hand, and I just said, sign me up. And I purchased the course, and then I ended up, because I had to fly out 10 times.
Wow.
And I had friends, I had 2 friends in New York City, very good friends of mine. So I knew I had a place to stay. But these plane tickets, they were all $98 round trip, all taxes and fees included, in order to make every trip there. And that to me was like, this never happens.
Oh, so that's a sign.
So it did. The world opened up, and it wasn't really financially restrictive.
No.
Even though everybody thought it might be.
Yeah. And when I went there, the very first morning I went there, I remember it was Halloween, and I walk in and it was like, I felt electric, like just everything lit
what
right
a great
up.
feeling. Yeah.
This huge auditorium in time. Where was it? At this circle, and I can't even remember the name of it, but it was this like huge auditorium, and the 300 people were there, and we had this incredible energy and speakers. So I just felt like I the thing I took away is like I listened to myself. I didn't listen to common sense.
Yeah.
And what was practical or logical. I did what felt right for me, what felt true for me.
Oh my gosh, that's so important for everybody who's listening to hear. It's so
total
important.
validation.
Yeah, like
that
if you feel
listen
that
to yourself.
pull,
Yeah.
you've got to answer the call. You know, what is it? The Life of Pi, right? Where answer that call. I love that you did that. Right now, is this one of these steps that led you to hypnotism?
It is.
Okay.
So one of the lectures, because it was all about, holistic health. So it wasn't just about food, even though it was Institute of Integrative Nutrition. It was also about oppression of different groups. It was about the planet and organic and what does that mean? And there was a lecture that was about beliefs around life and death. And this lecture, I'm come from a Hindu background. I'm not practicing, but my mom practices, and it's something that I learned about growing up. So I know about reincarnation. There was a lecture about reincarnation, and they talked about Brian Weiss, who is a famous psychiatrist, and he used hypnosis on one of his clients. It's written in a book called Many Lives, Many Masters, and
I love that book.
You know it?
It's life-changing.
Life-changing.
Yes.
For me too. And I'd never heard of this book before or Brian Weiss before. I come home that particular day to a different friend's home. The one time I stayed with a different friend because my usual friend had her cousin staying with her. And
This is when you were in New York?
In New York
Okay.
City. And I'm just bursting at the seams. And I could not stop talking about what I learned and about this book. And I got to get my hands on this book. And then I see the book as I'm talking to him. Right behind is a bookshelf. And I see it on the bookshelf. I'm like, that's the book.
He already had it.
He had it, but he said he'd never seen it before in his life.
Yep, that's the universe. I am
yikes.
telling you right now. I love that. I am going to do a side story if you don't mind. So I had an aunt who was a nun, but she was not your typical nun, okay? She smoked cigs, she wore jeans, she liked a beer, she was pretty cool. And she was actually really good friends with Mary Oliver, the poet. And when my aunt died, Mary Oliver got in touch with our family, and we had a quote at the church that said, that quote, "Tell me, what will you do with your one wild and precious life?" Right? And I love that question, especially as I get older. What will you do with your one wild and precious life? I got home from Connecticut, which is where the funeral was held, and I dropped something that fell behind a sideboard in my dining room, and I stuck my Swiffer, to pull it out. And out of there came a guitar pick that had that quote on it. What will you do? Tiny. And I still have it. And I'm like, where did this come from? She taught me how to play guitar when I was a little girl. And so I was like, it's on a guitar pick. It was crazy. So that feeling that you must have had, especially if he didn't even know he had it, because it was my house. Nobody else lived there. What is that guitar pick doing there? So he didn't even realize he had the book. I love moments like that. Sorry, I get very excited.
That was super cool. Honestly, and the book is all about how we don't just have one wild and precious life, and it's really up to us to learn everything we can from the wild and precious life we're living so that we hopefully can take it into the next life and evolve.
Yes, absolutely. That book was life-changing for me in terms of just trusting also everything that's out there and, really appreciating that there's so much that's happening under the sort of layer surface in terms of our five senses, but really starting to tap into those energies as well and to trust that. And I felt like my signing up for this course, taking on the debt, coming across this book, everything just aligned.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
It did.
Nice.
And so that's where my first story in terms of what I realized was I felt so lost, but then I did something that felt, again, more intuitive, listening within myself. And so I felt found from that. But then once I got on that path, it's like a river that just starts to carry you and life starts to meet you halfway.
Oh, I think
Excellent.
that's
Well,
so
tell us
important.
more about that. How did life meet you halfway after those life-changing moments?
Well, I did study hypnosis. My career started to really focus on holistic mental health after that. So sort of catching you then up to date to that next stage, I guess, in my life.
Yes.
Because I built a group practice and things were going, well. But I was small at that point, actually. It wasn't a group at that point. I had one other person working with me.
We'll call it a group.
We can call it a group, sure. So I was in a relationship it was in my later 30s. It did not work out. And in that relationship, I really thought like, okay, this is the one. I got to make it work. If I want to get married, if I want to have kids, I lost myself in that relationship.
I think a few of us can relate to that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
where you don't even really recognize yourself anymore. I had a friend who said to me after I got my divorce, he said, oh, you're back. And I didn't realize that
you
I
had
was
gone
lost.
anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So how did you realize you knew you were lost in it? What decisions, they're hard decisions, I imagine. What did you have to do to really embrace you in that circumstance?
I mean, even my own friends, similar to what your friend said, oh,
Yeah.
you're back. My
Yeah.
friends would tell me, like, you've got so much light, but your light has dimmed. And so that's what they would tell me.
Interesting.
And made me realize, and you got to trust your friends here when it comes
Right.
to that, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, I did try everything to make it work. And it wasn't working because that's, like I said, I thought that was what I was supposed to do. He checked off all the boxes.
Right.
But he was not committed. And so finally, with that realization that this is not working, like my friends in the meantime are getting engaged, getting married. And I had to pay attention to that too. Like the sense of inadequacy, again, this whole feeling like what's wrong with me.
Yeah, because it's set up for you that there's these expectations, right? And societally, there's expectations. And so that can eat away at you instead of just shutting down that noise. And like when you shut down the noise, you went to New York and changed your life, right? So you're able to shut down the you need a husband noise at this point? Or how did that work for you?
You know, I don't know. So I said it out loud, just again, questioning what's wrong with me. It's hitting me that that's probably one of the things too, in terms of feeling lost. That's happened when I was in my 30s, when I felt, depressed. And then in this time, and then also the next time, which I'll talk about as well. But this idea of like what's wrong with me, I think is something that does also thread through. But that's, I think, a sign.
I know, but it's terrible to always have to ask that question. So when you came out of this relationship or decided, all right, this isn't going anywhere, I'm out. Was that a moment when you found lost again or found again?
I felt I was very committed to finding myself. I was not yet 40, but I decided I'm going to throw myself a big birthday party. I'm going to start to date myself. I need to fall back in love with myself.
Yes,
Wait,
date
say that
myself.
again.
I love
You decided to date yourself.
I decided to date myself.
What a great concept.
And I had the best time in that time in my life. And I was still dating, but I was like, I'm not going to confuse these men with the main meal. I am the main meal. They're
Good for
side
you.
dishes.
That's for you guys out there. You are the main meal and they are side dishes. Write that down. That is the whole purpose of this podcast. That's a word of wisdom right there. I love it.
Thanks. So I just
love it.
knew I had to build myself back up. I need to get back to, again, welcome back, right? Like I had to find myself again. So, and I felt like really powerful in my life in terms of my work, and I was still small at that time in terms of the practice, but I felt on fire. It was great. Thought that I had accepted that I maybe not get married or maybe be like too old to become a mom at some point. I was really close to my nephews who were really young at that point though. And so it started to open up those feelings of like, I don't want a kid of my own. At the end of the day, they are not mine as close as I am to them.
Right.
So there were a few things, and I listened because I felt like the universe was whispering. Few things that had happened. I had a client who was a single mom by choice. She had a daughter named Grace and was looking to get pregnant for the second time. I also ran into somebody who is a colleague of mine, also from Indian descent, and she's in the mental health profession. She's a social worker. Ran into her at a conference. She talked about doing it. There were all of these things suddenly. I'm like, wait, you mean
you're getting signs?
It can get done? Like it can be done? And so ended up like having this meltdown with my mom on the phone and saying, I always thought I would be a mom. Like, what am I doing? Like, who am I going to be as I get older? And she said, if this is something that you really want, there is no substitute for that.
Oh,
and she said, maybe
that's
you should.
a supportive mom.
Yeah,
She was incredibly supportive. So I realized I don't know if that'll happen for me, but I know I will regret not trying. And both senses, like if I got pregnant, kind of like, and I swear, but it's just like,
you can drop any bomb you want in this.
but it's just like, holy shit, you know, if I get pregnant, but if I don't get pregnant, it's also like, holy shit, you know,
Right.
but either way, I'll figure it out. And I trusted that. but I knew I had to try. So I did get pregnant on the second try. Everything unfolded so.
Was this in vitro, I'm assuming?
No,
or
it was IUI.
I don't know.
Tell us what
I don't know
IUI
what
is. We're
IUI
not
is.
good with
Sure.
acronyms.
So intrauterine insemination.
Okay.
It is when they basically take the sperm and they put it inside of you. You know, people will call it like the turkey baster method. And they just like kind of put it toward the follicle that seems to be releasing the egg. And so it's as natural as you can get in terms of getting pregnant.
Gotcha.
So that is the least invasive. IVF, as we know, is more invasive, and
Yes.
that requires extracting eggs, and it's a procedure. So I was able to get pregnant. I was 40, almost 42 on the second try, like a month shy of turning 42.
That's
and I got
amazing.
pregnant. And so, you know, that's something that there was everything after that just unfolded pretty smoothly. Again, where I felt like life met me halfway. And then in the middle of my pregnancy, I started to feel like, so I used to quote Anais Nin a lot with my clients. And one of the quotes from her is, you know, and then the day came when the risk it took to remain tight in the bud became more painful than the risk it took to blossom.
Yes.
And something
I love that
about
quote.
like, I don't know, I love so many of her quotes. And so I decided to name my daughter Anais.
Aw, that's beautiful.
Lovely.
Beautiful name.
Thank you.
Gosh, I wish my mom had that kind of inventive thing. Mary, okay? Genuflect when you talk to me is what I'm saying. So beautiful. Okay,
Yeah.
so you have a daughter, Anais.
And then I had just decided on her name, but then I didn't really know, I think about a month or so later, I'm like, what does it mean anyway? And I looked up the meaning and it means grace, which I also thought was interesting because that was the client's daughter's name.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
yeah.
so there's just all these things that I feel like are not
Connective tissue.
And it was flow, right?
Yes.
It was part of the flow.
exactly. So that was in my 40s, and I had her when I was 42. So, shall I move
So the
on?
40s are great.
40s are
You
fantastic.
blossomed in your 40s, right? But your 50s
Thank you,
would...
Anais.
I've blossomed every decade.
See,
I feel like it's something new.
hey, listen, I almost thought you were going to say you named your daughter Blossom, which I thought would have been fun.
Oh, yeah.
Except for Mayim Bialik might not like that so much. But, okay, so you're blossoming, you have your child, you are learning all of those wonderful mom lessons that we get to learn. But then when you got into your 50s, again, I can't believe that you're even in your 50s just looking at you. But another challenge posed itself, right? Chapter 3, so to
Yes.
speak.
Yes.
Can you share a bit more about that?
Yes. So now we can move on to the group practice.
There you
It
go.
was going splendidly. It was, it was called Envision You. And I had this great team. I think we had hit about 16 of us in its peak. The pandemic hit. In some ways, it brought even more business to the practice and allowed us to grow. But it was also starting to create some strain and constriction, working from home. And we were a really tight, cohesive group. But with that, and then we had a number of audits. And then we had the clinical director in the practice, Josh. He had passed away suddenly. He had just turned 31. And he was a dear friend of mine and just a magnet to everybody in the practice. So that was a huge blow. That was the summer of 2021.
It's a big loss.
It is
right
a
in the
big
middle
loss.
of COVID.
I know. My sister is a social worker, and I remember her telling me during COVID how difficult it was, that she couldn't see body language and that kind of stuff when she was doing her counseling. So that's really rough. But 31 years old, I can't.
That's too young.
It's too young.
Yeah. He's just, that was a huge loss. And then as the group practice owner, I just jumped into trying to take care of my team as best as I could.
Yeah.
I just started also throwing money their way, like just whatever I could, because I was like, I want to take care of them. Already we'd been through so much with the pandemic. And there was a lot of burnout with therapists. There was, burnout all around across all industries. But then the first quarter of 2022, everybody ended up resigning, like from the practice.
The great
all at once.
resignation.
Great resignation,
The minute we
yep.
started to come out of it, because everybody had told us all through the pandemic, I'm going to get another job the minute this is over. And I was like panicked, and I'm sure you were too.
Yeah. And we had an office downtown. We had big rent to pay, and insurance does not give us raises. I've basically been getting paid the same since I joined insurance in 2011. So it just it was really becoming a struggle because cost of living and cost of doing business all went up so drastically.
Yes.
Plus different laws in Chicago and Illinois, which is the right thing to do, which is more paid time off, sick time, all of those things.
Yeah.
However, we don't make money if people are not working. So just like the revenue, we started operating under profit loss, and I had to rebuild my practice pretty much from scratch all of a sudden. So it was hard. I did not allow myself that time. I didn't feel like I could afford to allow myself the time to recover. I wanted to quit the practice. I could not do that. It was my practice. So that was hard. And then 2022, 2023, I just puttered out at that point. And I was a shell. And again, those questions about like, what is wrong with me? I felt like I'm not doing enough.
Another lost phase.
Yeah, I was like, I was not doing enough for the practice. I was not doing enough for my employees. I was not doing enough for our clients. I was not doing enough for my daughter. I was not doing enough for the home. I'd gotten a dog also.
Was that real, or was that what
That's
you
the best choice you've made so far, in my opinion.
I felt like a major dog mom guilt because I wasn't there for her either. And so I just was not enough.
So was all that real, or were you just telling yourself that you weren't enough and you weren't there for everyone?
I mean, it's that feeling, because the demands are just too great. I feel like impossible for a human to take all of that on. And then as a single parent as well. It was just, and we had just moved. And a dog mom. And we just moved also in spring of 2022.
These big transitions too.
Too much. So 2024, I did come back with some kind of new energy, but then I felt that didn't last for very long because of just a number of, again, other challenges with work. And so the second half of 2024, I was just like every day crying, every day, like feeling trapped and like I couldn't breathe. I did not know how to come up for air from this. It was just burying me alive.
Right.
And so that was something that, and talking to some friends of mine, especially like it's my lawyer friends, I have to give them some credit because they can see things more black and white. And like, you have a choice. You can get out of this. And my big thing was I had a lease that went until the end of March 2028. She's like, there's always a way out.
There's always a way out.
And so I ended up just deciding, I talked to my lawyer and decided November 1st, 2024, we are going to shut the practice down at the end of the year. And so that's what we did. But I needed to do that for my self-preservation.
That's a huge decision.
Yeah.
It is a huge decision. And it's so funny. I've recently been having conversations with people who have a lot of complicated things going on in their lives. And what you said about your lawyer friends, sometimes you need to hear your friends break it down for you, right? Because we can pile. Isn't that right? Like, oh, I got this and I got this. And even you just, my dog, my child, my practice, it all starts to pile on. But the purity of making a decision to do something that big for your own well-being is amazing. But it takes courage,
And is anybody else surprised that it was from a lawyer that gave you this great advice?
Well, the black and whiteness of it, I would say, like, hey, listen, I hear myself saying that to friends. I'm like, oh, stop overcomplicating this. If you hate your job, leave. You have choices,
We do.
And sometimes you need to hear that. Like, you can talk all about all the problems, but at the end of the day, there's usually a way back to yourself. So you found your way back to yourself from that big decision, I imagine, right?
Yeah. I mean, that one was something that I honestly couldn't even really see straight through that one because I felt so constricted and trapped. But because of the help of my friends and letting me know there is an out, and I did not have to I was not obligated to sacrifice myself. Nobody was winning. Nobody in this situation.
Right. So your exit strategy was a good one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, it took me some time, but I did find my way back to myself once again by allowing myself the time last year, 2025, to just spend time with myself instead of serving everybody else around me constantly.
Well, I imagine that made you a better mom, a better friend, all of that stuff. Because when you're pulled in so many directions, when you finally get to return to you, I think that's so important. I love that you take the time to do that.
And there was a major move, right? In all of this?
Yeah, she said they moved in, 2022?
Yeah, it was in closed on February of 2022. I did not
geez.
see all the things coming that came.
But you took a year of healing, right? What did that, how are you feeling now? You know what I mean? Like you took that year of healing, that was 2025, you said, right? So here we are in the nascent stages of 2026. What's on your mind now?
I feel so much more connected and trusting of myself again. And I feel really optimistic. And things have just been, I entered 2026 and things just started like, again, that flow piece of it and this clarity. And, I'm feeling really excited in terms of, what now is possible, like the space that is opened up in front of me versus feeling so trapped and constricted. And so I feel like there's these different kinds of discomforts that we experience in life. And, how do we tune into what feels constrictive and like really inhibits growth, might even cause us to wither. And then what's that energy that actually does also feel kind of scary.
Well, that's the Anais Nin's quote, because I love that quote. There was another one like it was the story of the frog in the boiling water. You know what I mean? It's the same thing where
a slow,
you're
unrecognizable,
unrecognizable. You're getting boiled to death, but the fear to jump out of what's familiar is so palpable. You could just die in there. So I love those types of metaphors in terms of what you're talking about here. I think it's really important for our listeners to hear this, that we've all been there in some capacity or another. You really need to think about, it's about having the courage. And it's so hard to have courage when you're feeling that cruddy too. It's like so hard to make those decisions, but there's a way out.
And there's been major ups and downs, right? So across your 30s, 40s, and 50s, is there a common thread? Are there several threads that just kind of, pull through all of that?
Yeah.
That you would tell our listeners?
Yeah. I think that one of the threads is starting to pay attention to yourself. Start to, I think energy has so much information in it. It really can inform us. And so, we are bombarded by messages all around us. And I think now more than ever, when I went through this the first time in my 30s, we did not have social media and phones and computers basically in our pockets and things that we're constantly looking towards. So in that sense, it was also started to feel more easier to explore. Now I feel like I got to work a little harder, but because of my own therapy, my friends, and last year I took a lot of time to just journal and reflect inward and gave myself permission. That's the other thing, is giving myself permission to step away from always the doing, and trying to be responsible and productive. And we've internalized this message as a society and in our culture, and then I think doubly so as women, to always be caretaking and always be doing the right thing. And so to allow myself, instead of doing the right thing, but to doing what feels right. Does that make sense?
I love the differentiation.
I do too. And I also loved that idea of energy, because when you were talking about that, I was thinking about how it had manifested for both of you, really, into something tangible. Yours was a book. Yours was a guitar pick. That's something I think all of our listeners would love to be on the lookout for now that they've heard that.
It's there. It's happening, but you have to, it's like turning a frequency, I think, right? I think that's just so important to hear from as many people as we can hear that from, because people do get lost, and making the decision to tune in. I love, like you said, you dated yourself or a year of healing yourself. I did once in my life. I was a serial monogamist. I would date somebody, and then when I got sick of them, I was looking for the next one before I got rid of that one. And it wasn't until I was in my 50s that I actually was alone. No man in my life, no partner in my life. And it was one of the best 3 years that I ever spent, was making yourself, what did you say, the main dish?
Yeah, the main dish.
The main dish. I think that's important.
Right, with no side dishes.
No side, maybe a side hustle here and there. But I went there, I'm sorry. So lost, found, flow, over and over again, right? And reinvention isn't a one-time event. What you're saying, it's a lifetime practice.
Yeah. Yes, that is great. date yourself, listen to yourself, all of those
Take
things
care
will
of
make
yourself.
that flow.
Yeah.
And make space. I think that when we get so busy that it also prevents us from allowing that quiet to be able to look inward and connect.
That's a
Yes.
whole, we could talk here just about the impact of productivity values on
Right.
people for hours. I mean, yeah, I'm from the East Coast, so I'm a Yankee. And a Yankee is you better, if you're working in a shoe factory and you lose your arm in a machine, they're like, don't take me to the hospital yet. I can make 10 more pairs. It's just this but it's not good for you, I just love this overarching message of choose yourself, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
And
Awesome.
trust yourself. And trust yourself.
Well, great. Well, we'll have to make sure that we connect later down the road so we can understand what goes on in your 60s and your 70s and your 80s.
Yes.
That would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Well, let me tell you about something else that's wonderful because it's actually something that Monica and I share in common, and that is our new sponsor, Women Belong. I'd like to tell you all they are such a great membership organization. They focus on bringing women together who are in almost any stage of their working career and help you network and build and grow and, just have some girl fun, right? So please check them out at womenbelong.com. And Monica, we can't thank you enough. This has been such a delight. Great stories.
Yeah, thank you so much for being willing to be vulnerable and open yourself up. It's for the betterment of everybody who's listening, so thank you.
Thank
We
you so much
appreciate
for
it.
having me. This was so much
Yes.
fun.
Great.
And don't forget to follow, share, all the things that I'm so tired of hearing about. But we'd like you to do those for our podcast.
There's lots of things we'd like you to do. Yeah. Yeah, and sign up for our newsletter.
There you go. There's one of those,
That'd
too.
be fun. All right, everybody, till next time, date yourself.
There you go.